Right now, at this very moment, the greatest wealth transfer in human history is already underway. Not approaching, not beginning, already happening. $124 trillion is changing hands. But here's the strange part. 95% of your financial success has nothing to do with how much you know about money. In this video, we're going to talk about the psychological mechanism that quietly determines who benefits from this massive shift and who ends up asking, 15 years from now, how they missed it. My name is Maya. I spend most of my time thinking about the gap between knowing and doing. That gap that almost everyone building a financial life knows intimately. You know what you should do. You've read the articles, you've heard the advice, and something you can't quite name, keeps getting in the way. I used to think that gap was about willpower, or discipline, or maybe just not being smart enough with money. I was wrong about all of it. A study published in the Journal of Financial Psychology found that financial literacy, how much you actually know about money, accounts for less than 5% of the variation in financial behavior. 5%. That means 95% of what shapes your financial outcomes has nothing to do with information. It is everything to do with psychology, with how your brain handles risk, fear, uncertainty, and opportunity, usually in real time under pressure, without you even realizing what's happening beneath the surface. I built this channel to give you something nobody gave me, an honest explanation of what's actually going on inside your head when you make financial decisions, not to judge it, not to tell you to try harder, just to explain it clearly enough that you can finally work with it, instead of constantly fighting it. If you want to know more about my story, I have a first video where I talk about my own life. Go check it out after this one. Today's video sits right at this intersection, because what's unfolding in the broader economy right now is genuinely significant, and whether you benefit from it will come down almost entirely to the psychological factors we're about to discuss. Let me take you back to March 9, 2009. The S&P 500 closes at 676 points. Lehman Brothers collapsed 6 months earlier. Retirement accounts across the country have lost nearly half their value. On the front pages of major newspapers, serious financial journalists are asking, in print, whether American capitalism might be fundamentally broken. The fear isn't manufactured, the situation is genuinely severe. And right in the middle of that environment, at the exact moment fear is loudest, a group of completely ordinary people make a quiet decision that will change the rest of their financial lives. They stay in. Some of them don't just stay in, they buy more. Not hedge funds, not Wall Street professionals with access to information the rest of us didn't have. Teachers, nurses, mid-level managers, people with entirely normal incomes and entirely normal lives, who did one thing differently from the majority. They refused to let the emotional intensity of that moment override a system they had built in calmer times. Here's what followed. From that March 2009 low through early 2026, the S&P 500 rose by more than 900%. The number of millionaire households in the U.S. climbed from roughly 8.4 million in 2010 to nearly 24 million by the end of 2024. According to UBS's 2025 Global Wealth Report, America added 379,000 new millionaires in 2024 alone. More than 1,000 new millionaires every single day. Most of them didn't win the lottery. Most didn't sell a company. Most simply showed up consistently through retirement accounts and index funds year after year. Now sit with this question for a moment. In March 2009, all the information was public. Market levels were visible to anyone with a brokerage account. The historical pattern, that markets recover, that downturns are followed by expansions, was no secret. Every financial book ever written pointed toward the same conclusion. So why didn't everyone benefit equally? Why did some people come out of that decade with real, lasting wealth, while others who lived through the same years, watched the same news, and had access to the same information ended up with nothing meaningfully different to show for it? Drop a comment right now. Be honest. Did you, or someone close to you, pull money out of the market in 2008 or 2009 out of fear? Yes or no? I read every single comment, and the patterns in your answers shape exactly what we cover next. The answer isn't discipline. It isn't intelligence. It isn't luck. The answer is a neurological phenomenon called present bias, and it quietly runs underneath almost every financial decision most people make. Here's how it works. Your brain didn't evolve in a world of financial markets for hundreds of thousands of years. It developed in an environment where the most dangerous threats were immediate predators, food scarcity, physical danger. The ability to delay gratification existed, but it was always secondary to responding fast to what was happening right now. As a result, your brain is structurally wired to give the present moment far more weight than the future. Not slightly more, dramatically more. Research consistently shows that people discount future outcomes at rates that would look completely irrational if you ran the numbers. The same result available today feels genuinely worth several times more than the identical result available 5 years from now. In a market downturn, this plays out very clearly. The pain you feel when your portfolio drops 20% is happening right now. It's physical. It's real. It's in your body, at full intensity in this moment. The recovery that history says is coming, that's abstract, that's the future. Your nervous system genuinely struggles to make that feel as immediate as a loss unfolding in front of you. So the brain does what brains do. It moves to stop the immediate pain, it sells, it shifts to cash. It does whatever removes the discomfort, even if doing so guarantees the worst possible long-term outcome. And this is exactly where most financial advice falls apart. Everyone tells you, stay invested. Don't panic, sell. Think long-term. Trust the historical pattern. Thanks, really helpful. Except that advice treats knowing and doing as the same thing. They are not the same thing. Knowing you should stay invested lies in your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that handles abstract reasoning and long-term planning. The fear-driven urge to sell comes from somewhere older, faster, and in moments of acute stress, considerably louder. In a financial crisis, the old brain almost always wins the argument. The people who stayed invested in 2009 weren't braver or more disciplined than the people who didn't. They had built structures in calmer times that made fear-driven action structurally difficult. Automatic contributions that continued regardless of how they felt. Rules decided in advance about what they would and wouldn't do during volatile periods. Decisions already made, so they didn't have to be made again in the middle of a crisis. They didn't overpower their nervous systems, they designed around them. That distinction is the entire lesson of 2009, and it matters more today than it has at almost any point in the past decade. Because here is what is happening right now. Truly Associates, one of the most rigorous financial research firms in the country, has published findings estimating that approximately $124 trillion in private wealth will change hands in the United States between now and 2048. $124 trillion. To put that in perspective, it exceeds the combined annual economic output of every country on Earth. It is more than 5 times the current U.S. national debt. It is 80 years of accumulated American economic expansion, now preparing to move across generations in a single window of less than 30 years. This is called the Great Wealth Transfer, and unlike the 2009 market recovery, it is not driven by sentiment or economic cycles or anything that can reverse overnight. It is driven by demographics, by the simple biological reality of aging. Baby boomers, born between 1946 and 1964, currently control roughly 52% of all private wealth in the United States. The youngest boomers are in their early 60s, the oldest are approaching 80. Over the next decades, that wealth will move to children, to grandchildren, to charitable institutions. Generation X is projected to inherit approximately $39 trillion, millennials, approximately $46 trillion, and as the process accelerates through the 2030s and 2040s, even Generation Z will begin receiving significant transfers before reaching the next generation. Truly estimates that roughly $54 trillion will first pass to surviving spouses, with nearly $40 trillion of that going specifically to widowed women. That single data point represents one of the largest expansions of female financial decision-making in American history. These are not optimistic forecasts. They are the mathematical outcomes of existing demographic data. The oldest boomers are already in their late 70s. Transfers are happening today. In real families, right now, the process has started. The only question is whether you understand what it means for the environment you're operating in. Now, here's the part that most coverage of this topic gets completely wrong. And this is the part that actually matters for most people watching. Inheritance alone is not where this opportunity lives. The data is clear. The vast majority of that $124 trillion is concentrated in a relatively small number of very high net worth households. Most families will receive inheritances that are meaningful, but not life-changing. Many will receive nothing at all. If you're watching this hoping a windfall is headed your way, that may not be the most reliable strategy. But here's what is real, and what almost no one is talking about. When $124 trillion changes hands, it doesn't sit still. Money moves, it gets reinvested. It flows into markets, real estate, and businesses. It shifts asset prices, creates employment, and reshapes entire sectors. It changes the economic environment for everyone operating inside it, whether they inherited anything or not. When trillions flow into investment accounts, broad asset prices receive support. When heirs buy homes, housing markets shift in ways that affect everyone already in those markets. When inherited capital backs new ventures, economic activity accelerates and creates opportunities that simply didn't exist before. The ripple effects of $124 trillion in motion reach far beyond the people who received the money directly. The last time anything at this scale occurred was after World War II, when the G-Bill triggered an enormous movement of capital into homeownership, education, and new business formation. That single capital movement helped create the conditions for the middle-class expansion that defined the 1950s and 60s. It produced, essentially, the baby boomer generation. And now those boomers are transferring the wealth that expansion created, closing a cycle that began more than 70 years ago. History doesn't repeat precisely, but it accumulates in patterns that reward the people who truly understand what they're looking at. Not long ago, I heard from someone who had been seriously engaged with financial topics for years. He listened to podcasts. He read the serious books. He knew the research on long-term market performance better than most people around him. On any financial literacy test, he would have scored well. But when he looked honestly at his actual behavior over the previous few years, his behavior, not his intentions, the picture looked different. He had pulled back during volatile stretches. He had delayed decisions he intellectually knew he should make. He had watched opportunities pass him by while waiting for a certainty that was never going to arrive. The problem was clear. He had no framework for understanding why his brain behaved so differently under pressure than it did when he was calm, reading, and thinking clearly. He knew what to do. He genuinely didn't understand why he kept not doing it. When he started working through the actual mechanics, present bias, loss aversion, and the specific ways financial stress quietly degrades decision-making before you even notice, something shifted, not a motivational shift, a structural one. He stopped treating his fear as a signal that his financial plan was flawed. Instead, he began understanding it as information about how his nervous system responds to uncertainty under pressure. Those are entirely different things, and once he could tell them apart, he stopped treating his emotional reactions as reasons to act and started treating them as variables his system needed to account for in advance. He made 3 changes, contributions that happened before he ever saw the money in his account, a written rule about what he would and wouldn't do during any difficult period, decided when he was calm, and binding when he wasn't, and a minimum 30-day gap between any significant financial decision and actually acting on it. 6 months later, he told me the improvement wasn't just financial, though it was real. It was that money decisions had stopped feeling like a constant argument with himself. The system was running, he was just living his life inside it. That is exactly what changes when the structure is right. Here's what I want you to do before this video ends. Step 1, right now. Before you move on, answer this question as honestly as you can. Do you currently have a financial system that operates independently of how you feel about markets or the economy on any given day? Not a plan, not an intention, a system. Contributions that run automatically. Rules for handling volatility that were decided in calm moments and hold in anxious ones. Behaviors that don't require you to summon willpower in the middle of a hard stretch. If yes, the great wealth transfer creates tailwinds for something that's already working. If no, the most important financial question you face right now is not which sectors will benefit or where the capital will flow. It's what is standing between you and building that system, because the gap between knowing an opportunity exists and actually benefiting from it is almost always psychological before it becomes practical. Pause this video right now. Write down your honest answer. Not for me, for yourself. That moment of clear-eyed self-assessment is worth more than anything else I could give you today. Step 2 this week. Identify one specific financial behavior in your life that currently depends on you making a deliberate, willpower-driven choice every single time. Saving a portion of your income, reviewing your spending, making a recurring contribution. Anything that requires you to choose correctly, consistently, over months and years. Then ask yourself, could this behavior be redesigned so it happens without requiring a decision at all? Because a behavior that runs on its own doesn't care whether you had a terrible week. It doesn't pause because a headline scared you. It doesn't wait until you feel ready. It just runs. Automation is not a shortcut, it's architecture. It's the structural difference between a financial life that works under ideal conditions and one that works under real ones. Step 3 for the next 30 days, pay attention not to what you think about financial news, but to how you physically react to it. The tightness in your chest, the urge to check your accounts repeatedly, the pull toward doing something, anything, to make the discomfort stop. Don't try to change the reaction, just observe it. Notice how quickly it shows up before any analysis. Notice how certain it feels, even when it's pointing you in exactly the wrong direction. That awareness is not passive. It is the beginning of the gap between stimulus and response. The space where every sound financial decision actually lives. One honest answer, one structural change, 30 days of genuine observation. The $124 trillion transfer is not a secret. The research is published. The timeline is locked in by demographics that don't shift based on market conditions, interest rates, or anything else that changes quarter to quarter. What is not determined is who benefits from the environment it creates. In 2009, everyone had the same information. The market bottom was visible to anyone who looked. The historical precedent was in every finance book ever written. And yet outcomes diverged enormously, not because some people knew more, but because some people had built systems that could hold up under the specific pressures of that moment. The same dynamic will play out across the next 20 years of the great wealth transfer. Moments of uncertainty, stretches of volatility, headlines that will, at certain points, make holding the course feel genuinely irrational. And underneath all of it, $124 trillion steadily reshaping the economic environment for every person operating within it. You are not someone who misses these moments because you aren't capable of seeing them. You are someone who, like every human being alive, carries a nervous system built for a world that looks nothing like modern financial markets. A nervous system that feels lost at roughly twice the intensity of an equivalent gain. That treats uncertainty as a threat rather than a neutral condition. That creates enormous internal pressure to act at precisely the moment when holding your system steady matters most. That is not a flaw. It is a starting point for every person who has ever tried to build a financial life worth living. The difference, the only difference that ultimately matters, is understanding it clearly enough to build around it. The great wealth transfer is a backdrop. How you move through it psychologically is a variable. And that is exactly what this channel exists to give you. One question before you go. Think about the last financial decision you later regretted, not because the outcome was bad, but because you knew, even as you were making it, that fear was driving it more than clarity was. What was happening inside you, not in the market, not in the news, inside you? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every single one. The patterns I see there shape everything this channel covers next. Because what you actually experience is almost always more instructive than anything in a research report. If something in this video hit differently than financial content usually does, subscribe. That is exactly what this channel is built to do. Not deliver strategies, deliver understanding. The kind that changes how decisions feel, not just what you know about them. And the next video takes one specific thing I mentioned today and goes much deeper. The mechanism operating underneath every financial decision you make, almost always without your awareness. Once you understand it clearly, everything else about this topic starts to fall into place. It's already there when you're ready. Watch it next.